happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 278 for December the 29th, 2022, our final episode of the year and ostensibly our year in review. Which may have something to do with cold weather. Who knows? We got some background themes going here. My name is Wes Fryer. I'm coming to you from relatively warm Charlotte, North Carolina, where it was 61 degrees and we had a heat wave today. It was amazing. But we did get a little touch of the cold recently. Joining me, and I am the media literacy and robotics teacher. Actually, I'm teaching an engineering design class this next year, semester 2. So computer science middle school at Providence Day School in Charlotte. Joining me as always is Dr. Jason Neiffer, the EdTech guru of the North, who has a background and the flannel to prove it tonight. How are you, Dr. Neiffer?
It is true. I am well, sir, and it has been a bit chilly up here in Montana. I will say though, we did have the superstorm go through the area, and I keep hearing the term atmospheric river, which is apparently a thing that's a regular occurrence now, despite its rarity in the past. And last Thursday morning when I woke up, it was negative 27 degrees Fahrenheit in Missoula. And to be clear, we didn't have it nearly as bad as other parts of the state. And my understanding is that Lincoln, Montana, which is located in north central Montana, small town with a lot of outdoor recreation outside of it, and they were down to negative 49 on Thursday morning, and they were doing the calculations on the news, and they had a 3 mile per hour wind, which at that cold, even a slight breeze can be super terrible from a wind chill standpoint. The wind chill was like negative 67 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty chilly here in the Big Sky country.
And we'll talk more about my geek of the week, which is my background. If you happen to be watching the video, hey, we even have a live viewer. Hello, live viewer. But that like dark purple in the northern northwest here, there is probably what Jason is talking about. So I was in Manhattan, Kansas this last week, and I know the wind chill was down to 25 below. I think it was probably like negative 10. Maybe it hit negative 15, but I mean, that's atrociously cold. And I visited with some different friends of my dad's and mom's who have lived in that town for their whole lives, and they don't remember ever having a cold blast that significant. So here in Charlotte and Matthews, where we live, we had a pretty substantial windstorm that actually knocked down a tree right behind our house. It snapped it off. It's like about 15 feet above the ground, but then it snapped off. Luckily, it didn't take out our fence. And there was some, power outages around the state. And yeah, we're not going to be a weather show, folks. But hey, it's the year in review. This was a pretty substantial cold snap. So, Dr. Neiffer, what would you like to do in tonight's show, and how is that going to be perhaps a little bit different than our usual shtick that we do here? But again, we're like doing the Thursday night thing. So glad somebody's joining us live. Sorry that we've had to make some changes here in the holiday times.
Well, let's see. I think probably the best place to start, Wes, is you and I both picked kind of 3 major headlines that we could pull out of 2022, and we thought we'd do a brief year in review. So I think probably the best way to do this is one of us goes first, and then we just go back and forth and talk a little bit about the story and where we think it might be headed in 2023.
You bet. Hey, we can also tell everybody, though, that you can find our links on edtechsr.com/links, and I'll put that link in the chat. Lisa Durf is joining us for, I think, the first time. And so, hello, Lisa. We're excited to have you join us live. Please jump into the chat and let us know your thoughts, any questions that you have. There on edtechsr.com/links, you will find a monster Google Doc that has all of our episodes from basically 200 until today with all of our links. We also will have in today's show notes, and I don't think I added it yet, a Mastodon link, because yes, ladies and gentlemen, the EdTech Situation Room is now on Mastodon. So we are usually going through just a ton of of news articles that we're kind of talking about. So yeah, we've got some summary ideas that we've tried, just sort of big ones. And Jason put his in first, so I just kind of tried to pick different ones. So did you want me to go first, Jason, or?
Well, actually, let's do this. Hey Siri, choose between Wes and Jason. I'm not sure if I understand. Well, okay, heads it's Wes, tails it's Jason. Siri, flip a coin.
I'm not sure I understand.
Wow. Okay. Wes, I'm going to go first. I would like to start off with that schools are continuing to dig out from COVID. And you can tell that this is becoming less of a story in part because we haven't had many stories on this specifically this year. But I think the story of 2022, 20, 30, 40 years from now is going to be that schools were still struggling with the aftermaths of COVID, even though the pandemic itself has changed nature, certainly. Some might argue it's waned a bit, but that it continues to provide struggles for schools. And both Wes and I work in specific kinds of programs that were impacted in a little bit of a different way during the pandemic. But from the standpoint of my program, in which I run a distance learning program, there seems to be a lot of conversation going on about what worked and what didn't work in regards to the school shutdowns that impacted a lot of parts of the United States. And there seems to be at least a national set of headlines to suggest that distance learning didn't work out so hot during the pandemic. But one of the reminders I like to make to people is that that was emergency distance learning, that in a lot of cases was trying to stretch the model very dramatically with a lot of folks that maybe didn't have experience or even desire to work in that format, and that it's not a particular surprise it didn't bring similar results as the face-to-face classroom. Any thoughts, Wes, about schools continuing to dig out from the pandemic?
Absolutely. I think that we all need to try to remember the things that were beneficial and good as a result of the pandemic and COVID. The point that, hey, some people will say this is their only experience with distance learning and it was horrible. Can certainly be the case. I've definitely had a sense both at my previous school in Oklahoma and then here in North Carolina, both talking to my wife as well, who's in a public school, and then the private school where I am. There's a substantial number of teachers that, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled definitely to be finished with masks for the most part, and with so many different things that we had to do. But I think that we really miss an opportunity if we don't take a look at some of those things that were beneficial, and also just, I don't know. I think that we've just continued to pile more and more on teachers, and that really happened a lot during the pandemic. I don't know that I've seen that trend change at all. I mean, we're very much in a teacher shortage here in North Carolina. We were in Oklahoma. Teachers are being asked to do much more with, in some cases, fewer resources and just more students, et cetera. But I think digging out of COVID from an educational technology standpoint, and we did this at the Summer Institute in Digital Literacy, which I just, have absolutely loved. The last 3 years, I got to go face-to-face up to Rhode Island in 2019, and then have been faculty for online for the last 2 years. My biggest takeaway from teaching both during the emergency online, distance learning, whatever, at home learning, and then the adjusted model that we use was just, SEL check-ins, checking in with kids about how they're doing, trying to not rush into content as much, trying to, recognize and digital tools. There's some really great tools. We didn't use Zoom. We used Google Meet, which has come a long way, by the way, in terms of its improvements, and COVID, played a big role in that. I know that parent conferences, I guess that's a good thing to point out. We continued this last semester of parent conferences to give parents that option. And I had about half of my parents opt to do that. It was great to be in person with folks. And I think that we probably did have some of the best, conversations and conferences, because we had student-led conferences when we were together in the room. But the chance to have parents in different places sometimes coming together, with the child and the parent and the teacher, that was a really, really big deal. And my encouragement, if anybody out there is an administrator or somebody who has input in school, is please, let's continue to offer flexibility to parents when it comes to parent-teacher conferences. I really do celebrate the fact that we are so much more capable just as a society with virtual. People are more adept now to scan a QR code. I got to sort of guest teach a Sunday school class here a couple of weeks ago at one of the churches we've been visiting. But I gave people a QR code, and I expected people to balk. They did, but my answer was, it's just like the menu, right? It's just like what we've been doing in menus throughout COVID. And so I think the positive, like the more we can talk with parents and the more we can communicate and the more opportunity that we have, there's all kinds of situations that people find themselves in. But I would put that up there near the top, that the SEL check-in was really good, and I need to be reminded of that myself, and how important that is to do on a regular basis with students, and how technology tools, because anyway, we ended up in the Summer Institute on Digital Literacy having some great modeling that people did of that at the beginning of sessions and stuff. But that whole conference thing would be a good thing to bring forward. So anything else that you'd say would be a good, because it, like, specifically for your program, y'all are online all the time. So I don't know how much did COVID have a substantial impact on your program specifically?
It did, yeah. We still see an uptick of students that are looking for online learning models because they felt like that either working at home or working in an online environment worked better for them. And one of the things that I think is not told very frequently in the stories about the pandemic and distance learning is that a lot of the surveys put the number of dissatisfied parents with the model under 70%, somewhere between, I've heard numbers as low as 55 and as high as 68% of parents were dissatisfied with online learning during the pandemic. But that still leaves at least a third of parents that find some value in the model or feel like the model worked pretty well for their kids. And we heard that story over and over again. And it's not a criticism of my brothers and sisters that work in traditional face-to-face schools, but rather that there are some students whose circumstances do demand more flexibility than the traditional face-to-face environment typically allows for. And that's where my program, I think, can become a pretty big deal. And I just want to put an exclamation beyond one of your points about parent-teacher conferences. I think a lot of things should continue to have some type of Zoom in or opt-in video conferencing version when it's possible or logical to do so, not the least of which school board meetings, public meetings of any kind, legislative committee hearings. I think anytime we can afford people those flexibility using something like a Zoom or a Google Meet or one of its alternatives, I think that's a good thing. So, okay, to you, Dr. Fryer.
All right. So my first one, and I'm going to just admit here at the outset, I'm certainly leaning a lot more towards our recent topics in the last few months. But I put TikTok Ascendant, and I put in a reference to our October 26th show, which was episode 273. And I think we named that episode TikTok for News. And I think it was in that episode that you shared an article, if I flip down through here, that TikTok is now this was just a Verge article saying from October 24th, increasingly become a news source. But I don't know if that one says it, but like as of, there it is. Pew Research Center increasingly, okay. The percentage of people getting news from TikTok has tripled since 2020. Around 10% of all U.S. adults now regularly get news on the app. For adults under 30, that number jumps to 26%. And it seems to me like, we had an article that was saying that for Gen Z, TikTok was the number one source of news. And our kids are now 19, 22, and 25. But just from and our 22-year-olds lived with us here for the last semester, all the time with TikTok and mentioning different things and stuff she's coming across. It is the most, I think TikTok is the most important media platform for a younger demographic than anything else. And I think that we are still not even realizing that, much less grappling with it appropriately as teachers. I've said for years that now that video is the pencil of the 21st century, we need to be creating video, and we did some of that during the pandemic, although it was under duress. We need to learn how to be, more savvy consumers of video and media. And so I just, when you had shared that article originally, and we'd had that discussion on the show, there's certain moments that are sort of like this waha light bulb. Sometimes even Jason will do the cha-cha-cha-ching, you'll get the absolutely professional background noise or background, sounds, transitions. It's incredible, folks. It rivals NPR. Not really. But it's seriously, I think that is a huge thing. And I think that's worthy of like grappling with, not only on this show, but I could see there being an ed camp focused around video and TikTok, because the disinformation, the whole aspect of whether, that China and ByteDance is the Chinese company that controls that, the impact that has. We've had more articles talking about, the U.S. military and government banning uses of TikTok on, government-owned devices. But we've also, you wonder what's politics and then what's actually a security concern. And then I'll talk about Twitter later, but when you see just how important the individual and group controlling the algorithm on the social platform is, it just seems like it's enormous. So any thoughts?
Yeah, the thing I would add to it from my standpoint is that there is absolutely a broader security conversation going on about TikTok. I just don't feel like there's enough information for me to directly recommend never getting on TikTok. It's been now banned in federal government devices as part of the $1.7 trillion budget that was just passed. It's been banned on a lot of state-owned devices in the past couple of weeks, including the state of Montana has banned it from all state-owned technological devices. Also, you can't utilize the software on a state network or during state time. So that's obviously a huge restriction.
Really?
It's even though state time. Yeah. So
so that was every school network, every university network.
I would assume on school. Yeah. I mean, I think they were talking about state of Montana owned devices as opposed to government owned devices.
And if they're talking network, I wonder how extensive that goes as far as like if it's a taxpayer funded network.
Yep. So a huge amount of resources going against TikTok, and I still am not entirely sure if I understand what the security risk is. I agree it's problematic to have data with access to other governments, to have access to that private data, but I just don't know what evidence of that exists. And I think there are of accessing that data exists, and there is. I think we're owed some of that information, but a bipartisan group of legislators at the federal level, so members of various committees that have international jurisdiction, Democrat or Republican, have said that they believe there's a serious threat that TikTok poses. And that's the part that I'd love more information on. But, the Pew Internet research that you'd cited from earlier this year, it mirrors a lot of surveys which suggest that people of a certain age, 25-ish, is a number that I would probably say is a fair bet. Most of the research averages around say they're getting some, if not most, of their news from TikTok. And there are lots of traditional news sources on TikTok. There's also kind of some upstarts and some, I guess I would call them social media news celebrities. I'm thinking about V from Under the Desk News, who I tune into pretty regularly because I enjoy her commentary and like the way she approaches news and being informed. I also know that a lot of creators post to TikTok suggesting that when they mention voting in TikTok videos pre-election, they started losing viewership, so they weren't being showed as much. So a lot up in the air here. I hope we can find out more maybe in the next couple of months about what the overall risk of using these tools come down to.
As we talk more about TikTok, I'll share my own TikTok profile for Cook with Wes, where I'm sharing my barbecue, and that was as in 2022, right? I'm positive that was Jason's encouragement of, hey, do you know about barbecue TikTok and these hashtags. And anyway, I think I resuscitated a TikTok account that I had created and only posted to once or twice, and thought, oh, let's just share cooking videos. It's really that idea of playing with media, right? And then I'm going to learn a little bit more about the platform because I'm going to spend a little bit of time there. I don't spend a ton of time there. To your question, Jason, I, of course, have an unclassified answer to this at this point, but I think there's two primary reasons for the concern with TikTok. I think the number one reason is the race for AI. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about AI tonight, but the fact that ByteDance is not a social media company, it is an artificial intelligence company. And I would argue the number one Cold War happening right now, a hot war going on in Ukraine that continues through the winter, but there is a Cold War happening between China and the United States, and it is a fight for the future, and it is a battle for artificial intelligence. And I mentioned this on the show before. We had a graduate in the last 12 years ago from our school who works for OpenAI, come speak to one of our entrepreneurship classes in November. And he shared that there's folks that he works with at OpenAI that think we're going to reach AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, when the capabilities of the AI equal and then exceed human cognitive capacity within 18 months, and that he himself is more in the camp of 5 years. But like, there's consensus there that we're going to reach that. How quickly, organizations like Google or OpenAI or the government of China are able to reach that has to do with the amount of data that they can ingest into their systems and train them, and also processors and processing power. And we had a month ago or 2 months ago, the United States banned this whole level of chips that can no longer be sent to China. And so anyway, I think the first part of that has to do with really the United States government wanting to slow and impede in any way the Chinese government's ability to win and beat us in the race for AI. And then I think the second part of that is just all of that information and the way in which information about us can be utilized in aggregate, or very specifically, if you happen to want to travel to China. This is a real issue, and I've posted quite a bit about the Uyghurs, and we talk about on the show, oh, hey, we're being translated, our voice is being, translated into text, into a script as we speak, because these speech to text tools that have been improved through machine learning are so much better. I think that there are real risks that we have as individuals, and I think there's risks that we have in aggregate, but it continues to be very difficult to make that case to the average citizen who says, what are you talking about? I like Facebook. I like using, TikTok. I like social media. What's the problem? This isn't hurting me, and people just don't process, because it's not personalized, the danger that we have by essentially giving away so much data about ourselves. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
A lot to think about. Okay, so I guess that leads me into my next topic here, which is that artificial intelligence is marching forward. And what I would say is, I guess I feel like this snuck up on me a little bit, in part because there's been an estimation about AI's massive impact on everything, but in particular education, for the past 7 or 8 years. And I feel like it's been much ado about nothing. And I maybe delayed by the pandemic a little bit, but it feels like in just the last 10 weeks, the conversation has gone from a sleepy backwater, maybe someday conversation about education, and also what thinking looks like, what learning looks like in an AI, in a post-AI world, to something that's going to impact us next week, sort of a deal. So I guess I'd start with, I've been having a lot of conversations with a lot of people in lots of parts of the education industry, not the least of which is a weekly opportunity to check in with Dr. Fryer. I also talk with my colleagues at the University of Montana, and also other state virtual school leaders. And what I would say is that lots of kind of cocking one's head to the side and thinking about maybe what's next, to some panic about assessment and learning, to at least a half dozen questions have been posed to me, some by social media and others directly, about, doesn't this call education into question, not just our methods for doing so in 2022. So Dr. Fryer, any thoughts there?
So the first two are this. Number one, every single one of us needs to play with some of these generative AI tools that will generate textual content and that will also generate images. This should be a priority for professional development for every single one of us in the next couple months. And the reason why is because it needs to be personalized. I think when you not only see someone do a demo of, putting together some words and seeing these images, and then putting the name Greg Rakowski, who's this incredible sort of fantasy, illustrator, and just what these tools can do in terms of generating images, but then text. Because realize this, up to this point, and this happened a couple weeks ago for my wife. She had her fifth graders writing essays, and she was reading me this, and I said, "Honey, I don't think they wrote that. Let's Google that as an exact word search." So we put quotation marks around a couple sentences, Googled it. We found the exact article where the student had copied and pasted basically the entire essay. That shows up, that kind of cheating and plagiarism turns up on turnitin.com. There's, I think, an assignment checker now. I think you have to be like at some extra level of Google where you're paying in order to have more than a few of these. But anyway, there's tools that can help you pick up that kind of thing. The generative AI tools that are now publicly available for anybody to use are going to create pretty reasonable, some people will say, depending on the topic and the ways that you're prompting, master's level type content, and it can be very specific, and it's new creative content. It's not content that is just scraped off of the web that will show up on a turnitin.com search. So students starting today or starting a few weeks ago can show up in our classrooms turning in essays that have either been written entirely by a generative AI platform, or, and I think this is an example of how we are becoming augmented, and we're going to want to utilize these tools to be more powerful humans. If you wanted me, Dr. Neiffer, to write an essay about Huckleberry Finn and the philosophy of Immanuel Kant and how, Huck personified the categorical imperative in recognizing that Jim was a human and a man, and not that was actually an essay that I wrote in college my junior year. I could have the AI probably start a great essay, and then I could tweak that a little bit more, and then I can turn that in. And you would not be able to Google that and say, "Oh my gosh, look, Wes just copied that straight off of this website." So anyway, I think this is the TikTok deal was really big for me, but I'm like you, in the last 10 weeks, I don't know, 2 months, something like that, I have had some real big ahas actually using the tools and seeing them in action, to where I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really a big deal. And it's not just like, oh wow, it's Google Glass that lets somebody take a tour of CERN in Europe and make a cool video of it. No, this is stuff that we can use, our students can use, and essay writing, it's like very basic to what a lot of us do in terms of assessing students.
By the way, I would add one other note. I'm not sure if this was true weeks ago when the Magic Write tool was available in Canva, or if this was more recent, but there is also a text-to-image tool in Canva. So you can type in this case, I just asked it to put have an elephant in glasses taking an online class on a laptop, and it generated an image of me of just that, or for me for just that. So again, these tools aren't theoretical. They're available right now in tools that are commonly used by our students.
I might have my students this semester do an Ignite presentation, which is like, 20 slides, talk 20 seconds per slide for a 5-minute presentation, using entirely AI generated images.
Yeah.
And just like you're using Canva, we started using what am I trying to say? The sticky note software. Help me, Jason. I'm having a moment.
Google.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Where we're doing sticky notes. Here, Lisa. This is a quiz. This is the interactive part of the show. I can get it here because I'm going to put dashboard. See, I'm on a holiday. Okay, dashboard at Padlet. We've got Padlet as a licensed software tool that we use, which is fantastic. And it has a little option that you can click on there and say, I can't draw, and then it will create the drawing for you. So there's, anyway, it's integrated in with one of the EdTech tools that we are already using. So yeah, Lisa says Jamboard. Jamboard is awesome. I don't know if Jamboard, I don't think, Jamboard's had some auto draw features. I think you had to be on an iPad at one point to have the auto draw work, which is AI and machine learning augmented. But this whole thing of, create a picture for me, make it more realistic, make it look more like a Picasso, make it look like a Greg Rakowski, all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, we'll see. I think I mentioned on one of our shows, I had emailed my principal here at the end of the year, just like, hey, I think this is a big deal. It'd be cool to, take at least 15 or 20 minutes out of a faculty meeting to talk about it. And hopefully we will. But whether we're doing this independently on our own or we're doing this with colleagues, we also said this, and it bears repeating. I think it's good to not just say the sky is falling, game over assessment, and just let's all lose our minds. I don't think we need to do that. And I don't think that's helpful. I do think that it really is a very visual and even experiential reflection of rapid discontinuous change, which we continue to experience in 2022, entering 2023. But I think processing that change together and talking about it and then and wrestling with it and trying to come up with some constructive ways of utilizing it, because it is a reality, right? Sort of like a calculator. That's different when kids are taking a face-to-face test, but you've got to grapple with things, especially in an online situation, right? What are students bringing? What are they able to do? How are you going to change your assessment? How are you going to change your assessment if you recognize that students are able to bring different kinds of tools and things to the assessment that you're giving them?
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, Wes, back to you.
Okay. I put Twitter dumpster fire. So I will apologize to everybody that I have, again, fallen behind a little bit on publishing our back episode. So I need to get with it because the holidays are almost over. But back on November 9th, our episode 274 was titled Twitter Dumpster Fire. And I will say I did not foresee and expect, just as the AI was a surprise toward the end of this year about how good it's been. We talked about it on the show because it was sort of like a, look at Microsoft's chatbot that's so bad. And yeah, AI will change the world later. But, how good these tools are and how accessible they are has really been a surprise. It's also been a surprise to me how ugly things have turned quickly at Twitter. And in these touches on my own perceptions of Elon Musk, who I will admit, I don't know, just with a lot of people, you're sort of starstruck by, oh, look, rockets, oh, look, electric cars. But the stuff that he's done, and some of it they've walked back. I haven't tried to put my Mastodon link again into my Twitter profile. I did today edit my name to just put with text, my Mastodon. But I think the meltdown that we've had with Twitter, and I don't know, when we were seeing some things in the last couple of days where evidently there was some unresponsiveness to the website. We know that social media platforms have played and continue to play a huge role in our society. They played a big role with Brexit. They played a big role in the 2016 elections. I kind of think maybe they played a somewhat lesser role in the elections of 2020. We certainly didn't hear about, for instance, Russia's involvement and a lot of the same kinds of things that we heard back in 2016. But I don't know. It's one of the foremost things on my mind because I spend so much time on social media, and I've really been spending more time on Mastodon. I've had very good experiences there. It's like the early Web 2.0 days of like the mid 2000s and late 2000s when there were fewer folks using blogs and in these discussions because it was geekier. You had to use this thing I called an RSS reader, and you were, just kind of bumbling around in the dark a little bit more to try to find people. It was harder, but you could find people sharing really great ideas, and it really enriched your life to encounter those folks and then have a portal, a radar screen through which you could, see the ideas that they were sharing, you could interact with them, etc. So I think that the meltdown of Twitter is a huge, huge thing. I think that overall it could be beneficial to us to have Mastodon, but I haven't shared this on the show because it just happened a couple nights ago, but I happened to look at the feed of my instance, and Jason, you and I are on the same Mastodon instance. I set up EdTech SR incidentally on Mastodon.education, which is an education specific instance. And I saw some horrific things that would absolutely have been censored and users banned forever if they had shared that on Twitter or on Facebook or on another platform. Should I have reported it? Maybe, but I don't know enough about Mastodon to know if I'm accountable or that person might come back at me and do something. And so anyway, I was just pretty distressed to see that. And I am not sure if I want to stay on this instance. They also haven't updated it, and we don't have an edit feature, on our posts, our toots, and you do on more newly updated instances. So anyway, Lisa says none of us foresaw this. Yeah, I mean, it's like, did anybody foresee how social media would be weaponized and extremist groups were going to take such advantage of these tools and these platforms? It's a game of cat and mouse that's continually being played. But anyway, I see that as a pretty substantial event of the year. What are your thoughts, Dr. Neiffer?
Yeah, I guess I would just also say too that I think everyone has a different experience on Twitter because of the logarithmic thinking behind it, right? And so most of my Twitter account has always been just generally about education and technology, and I don't follow relatively that many politicians or cultural leaders or celebrities or anything along those lines. It's been mostly centered in that ed tech world, and so the discussions I get into is the merits of Chromebooks, right? That's a different discussion than the things that are going on. And I think that there are some people that have maybe a legitimate beef that Twitter has looked better for them since the conversations turn more into a kind of sort of free speech free for all, although part of the problem is that free speech doesn't seem to be consistently applied in the new Twitter model. To those that were saying things like the day after bots were supposedly kicked off, their bot numbers increased and they were getting hassled in chat by bots, which I can't even imagine what that's like. But more importantly, I never really had that big of a problem with bots. And in the weeks since the new anti-bot measures were turned on, I've suddenly have clear bots following me.
Have you had NFT bots? Because I continue to have almost every day some different account, which I'll always ban and block, which is telling me how great this later cryptocurrency, NFT, whatever. And I never had that before. And that's just happened in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, yep, totally. That's my experience as well. So, the fact that you and I are Mastodon, it's clearly not my preferred channel. In fact, I'm not entirely sure what my preferred channel is anymore, and especially since I've changed my relationship with tools like Instagram and Facebook as well. But
How changed?
Say it again.
How have Instagram and Facebook changed for you?
Well, I mean, Facebook has never been really a professional platform for me. It's always been a personal platform. And in fact, I don't even really talk about my profession all that much. I mean, other than sometimes, day in the life of teaching kind of pieces. But I've tried to scale back a little bit. I deleted the app off my phone about a year and a half ago. I don't check in nearly as much. I probably check into Facebook once or twice a week now instead of once or twice a day. Instagram is a little more serious for me, in part because I feel like it's harder for things to be bad there, but also I have to curate quite a bit there as well. And to be honest, I spend more time on TikTok than either of those two. And because, barbecue TikTok and cooking TikTok and book talk and teacher talk is pretty funny. And I think, I got sucked into it for sure.
All right. Hey, it's we're 2/3 of the way done with the show. We're each done with 2 topics, and we have Geeks to Week. So maybe we're pacing ourselves well. I put a comment in there for Lisa. She said Packet is cool. I don't know if she was talking about Pocket or Packet. Is there a tool named Packet? I'm not aware of that. We'll see what she puts into the chat here. That's okay. You can move on to your next one, and we'll.
Great. And then I guess maybe this actually has to do with all the above, but we've often talked about what we call the tech correction here on the show, with all of social media seeming to take some sort of hit or reconsideration, or at least a reckoning of some sort. That's going to definitely continue on 2023. But you take TikTok plus Twitter, plus Facebook trying to reinvent itself as something else completely. You take all these together, and it's just an incredible amount of philosophy or philosophical being plus time away from when these tools were getting started, 16, 18 years ago. So I continue to look forward to see where this train is going, and I hope that more of these tools bring connection with others as opposed to derision.
We still haven't seen any substantial privacy law federally in the United States. We have seen, California pass some legislation. My perception is that we're continuing to see Europe kind of lead the way with respect to some regulation of the attention economy and the harvesting of our data and sort of the Wild West that we've seen with big tech. It will be interesting to see if the fallout of Twitter, anyway, what kind of an impact, if indeed advertisers and journalists walk away from Twitter, I think that will be a big deal. If Twitter can't make money, that will be a big deal. But, these privacy issues, we really, I think, need an uprising of the people. And the thing that's so odd is, as we already talked about on the show, sometimes it's hard to even understand for ourselves individually, what's the harm? How am I being hurt by all this data being taken and not having a right to privacy, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm interested to see how that moves forward. But again, I would like to see more specific proposals and specific advocacy agendas that we might want to get behind as educators and also as, somewhat savvy, technology using citizens, because I just don't. I think there's a lot of hand wringing. And what was it, a couple of years ago that the social dilemma was really big and people got upset and they said, "Oh my gosh, look at this! I know I have that experience at my house. Everyone looks at their screen and it's just bad." But I don't know that anything has happened. I will say that the group that did that primarily was behind the social dilemma, Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Computing, I think. Is that right? They've got a great podcast, and they had, and in fact, because this was a pretty big event in 2022, the Frances Haugen from Facebook. Hey, look at that. I'm 52, and I remembered I could actually pull that name out of the head. Was that in 2022 that Frances Haugen testified before Congress, and we had a lot of hoopla because she was the whistleblower?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could obviously Google that to see real quick. But that she was just on the Center for, let's see, Wall Street Journal 2021. Okay. No, it's October 2021. Oh my, how fast it all goes. All right, so it wasn't even in this last year. I don't know. You have these splash events that capture people's attention for a little while. It's the social dilemma on Netflix. It's the testimony of Frances Haugen. It's the election of 2016. But then, things move on. So hopefully there'll be more substantive action taken that positively and constructively helps the situation, rather than just creating more unintended consequences and impeding the, march of innovation. But anyway, I am reading a lot more about, I guess this is political, but, letting billionaires just do whatever they want, thinking about Elon and Twitter, or just assuming that because they've been successful in this, business, they're knowledgeable about everything. Let's just let them do whatever they want and not pay taxes. That may not be a great idea. So anyway, hopefully there'll be some positive, results of all of that. But are you going to do anything with the tech correction, Jason? You going to write a book on it, or
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple presentations I've done on it at conferences. I've also thought it'd make a heck of a blog if I had time to write really good in-depth stories, which I don't. But yeah, I don't know, maybe historically it'll be known as the tech correction, and maybe we'll get a footnote somewhere because of it. So
Okay. All right. Well, my last one goes back to the end of August, August 31st, and we titled our show The Rise of Bossware. And so I had never heard of this term bossware um, until having some articles that we talked about, during the show. This was certainly fed by COVID and the pandemic. This idea of being able to have tracking software that is watching you, take tests and using AI tools to try and do that. But Bossware also, it's not just for academics and test taking. It's also software that tracks people's mouse movements, and there's new software that people will buy that keeps their mouse moving and there's all kinds of things that have happened during COVID and afterwards. Sometimes people trying to do two jobs at once. But anyway, that's a sign of the times that we're living in, with more and more work as well as study happening online in a virtual environment. Organizations, schools, businesses want to do things to try and ensure people aren't cheating, people aren't stealing, people are being honest. I think even within Google, and I've not been a tech director now for 3.5 years, but I'm pretty sure that if you're a school paying for the second or third tier, or maybe that's just the first paying tier or the second paying tier of the what is now Google Apps for Education, Google Workspace, you have some more substantive tools to be able to find out, hey, who's checking their email, who's looking at docs, who's doing such and such. Have you dabbled in any of those tools in the Google admin area?
Not really. I mean, we do have to chase a lot of I didn't get that email down using the e-discovery tools, because that's a good percentage of my job, is to try to connect people who think they might have emailed when they haven't.
Right.
But the bottom line is that no, we haven't spent that much time there. And I have to say, I mean, this is probably going to be a little crass, but we've been kind of training workers for the last 20 years to do this, because we use those tools in schools all the time with students. And I'm not, saying that to debate their merits at all, because I'm sure that would be an important and hearty discussion. But the bottom line is that surveillance is kind of part of the game in managed environments. And I would say, if you're truly considering, if you're an administrator, school administrator somewhere, utilizing these types of tools, even if you have people that work primarily online, I think you just got to get employees to trust and build a trusting relationship, even if they can't be under your nose all the time. So, but that's probably neither here nor there. But these tools are getting a lot more serious very quickly.
I'll tell two quick stories that are positive, but they also point to how in school we need to have capacity to, appropriately use and deal with the information that can come out of this. A friend of mine who's a technology director of a very large suburban district, I think it's Lightspeed that they're using. It really allows for even classroom teachers to have a granular report on basically when the filter has been tripped for students. And this was at a school where they were using Chromebooks and iPads. But those kinds of reports, if I'm remembering right, the district could also allow parents to be able to see. And so, we've had filters on the internet forever, for schools, and E-rates required that. But being able to potentially, have a teacher or a school administrator or counselor or a parent, get a report on what's the child, tripping with the filter. I had an experience at my new school in North Carolina, and I will chalk this up really positively, that our IT department, does some intermittent spot checks. It's not like, and I know this as a tech director, you're not sitting there watching everybody's, mouse move, and you don't have time to do that. But they do some spot checks. And there was actually a student in one of my classes who was doing some Google searches about VPNs. And so the tech director ended up pulling that child out of my class and having a conversation about, what are you doing looking up VPNs, and anyway, I think he was like, what, so it's important to know that, yes, Big Brother can watch and can see those. And I think that if some of these tools are developing that kind of capacity, that can be good, but we also need to be ready with professional development and with personnel and also with policies to say, do you want to have this information? And if you get it, what is your plan for how you're going to utilize it? And how does that intersect, legally as well, with student rights and things like that? I'm trying to think of the name of the tool. There's one that we use to monitor both email and Google Docs for any references to weapons, to threats, to bullying, and I'm not having the name of that come right up, but anyway, I know that when I was able to introduce that at our school, we needed to have a lot of protocols in place for who actually got to see that, and then how it was actionable and how all of that worked. It was just critical and vital. So anyway, that is kind of tied to this age of bossware and surveillance. And we've been having those capabilities and need to know that, hey, email is being archived and retention, it's being retained for years and years after we send it. And we want to be really careful about all that. But some of this is qualitatively changed as far as the information, perhaps, that teachers, that parents, that administrators are having access to. And I think it's just important to think those things through and have a plan, for what we're going to do with that information, if indeed we get that, because more information isn't always, a great thing. And in many cases, it adds layers of complexity and challenge to our lives that we may or may not have had to deal with or have had to deal with in the volume that we could potentially be doing in a district of 45,000 kids or something like that.
Totally.
All right, well, we have talked for about 50 minutes. We can throw the question out there to Lisa, and we have another live viewer who's out there. So if any of you have thoughts of a theme that was significant in 2022 impacting educational technology of the year, were there anything else, Jason, before Geeks of the Week that you that almost made your top 3 list? Or how did you? Oh, I made a word cloud actually, which I need to. I don't know what's a fast website to just throw this up. I took out all the months and the civil words and the years, but correction. The word Ember was up. Why would that be up? Tech, Twitter, Facebook, Windows, Ukraine, Microsoft, privacy. Ember and Timber. That's weird. Oh, you know what? It's because I eliminated. I was trying to do the abbreviation for those months. So anyway, sorry, that was a distraction. iPhone, space, Facebook. I don't know. I was thinking, couldn't AI help us with this? Because I took all of the show notes, right, for the entire year. Word has that, right, where you say summarize text, but
right. Anyway. Well, a couple thoughts about that in regards to, focusing on the what if instead of the, OMG, this is terrible part of this. I mean, that would be a really interesting tool that if you and I could cut and paste, I mean, in a way, a word cloud generator is a bit of an artificial intelligence in that you're asking it to prioritize what it considers to be the most important or the most prolifically mentioned topics in a list, right? But imagine for a moment if you could do what you did there in the word cloud, but instead have it trace for patterns, right? Earlier versus later, the tense of the sentences, what can be predicted about what's about to happen next based on these headlines. And those tools may not be immediate, but probably aren't that far off into the future. And once AI becomes a tool set that you can start to meaningfully process your own data and ask your own questions, as opposed to taking the massive amount of data that the current set of tools utilizes and try to answer questions from it, I think that's going to prove to be a mind-blowing experience for learners and teachers alike.
Lisa comments that she keeps hearing enrollments in higher education are down. And I responded that I think a reckoning in higher ed is happening. And this is actually related to my job search, right? I applied to 35 different places and ended up, staying in K-12 education and coming here to North Carolina. But, the pandemic gave a lot of people more experiences with online education. It also I think did a pretty big number on the job and labor market with respect to there's just a lot more challenge that people have now in filling minimum wage jobs and having enough folks doing lower paying jobs. I've had some conversations with some different people that talked about, deciding, and part of it was during the pandemic, having some money and reflecting, and anyway, just deciding they were going to do something else. They were going to go back to school. They were going to, they didn't want to work food service forever or whatever. But I think that, the cost of higher ed, having one college graduate, one almost college graduate a semester away, and then one that is on the brink of college, it's very, very expensive. And, all of the loans, all of the debt that's out there, enrollments definitely, took a hit in some areas. I don't know. You're on the campus of a major university, Dr. Neiffer. So do you know if the University of Montana has been affected by that as far as enrollment numbers? And
we have a long trend of enrollment decreases in the University of Montana, and it has stabilized in the last 18 months over a historic trend. This is going over, I think it was 8 or 9 years. So our trend may look differently than other institutions of higher education. But I guess my quick answer of what I think would probably be an hours long discussion is that I think the pandemic hastened a trend in higher education that was happening anyways. I think critical discussions are starting to become a part of the discourse about higher education. And I have no good answers other than to say that I think a lot of people have become dissatisfied with the model. I'm not sure if I have the answer of what's next there or what should be next or what will be next, but I'm hoping that we could find more ways to give people access to formal education to help them live their life's dreams. And that's what I think the promise of K-12 and higher education has always been, and that we should be prioritizing that as part of whatever we do with this broader model.
I was able to have a phone conversation with my first boss that I had at Texas Tech when I was a director of distance learning in the College of Education there, and just wonderful to touch base with him. And he's retired and living in Colorado, but he mentioned some numbers, not only about Texas Tech, but also Texas A&M and UT, and the number of tenure track faculty. And I don't know that this was specific to the education college. I think this was across the university, but basically that there's just a lot fewer tenure track positions that the universities are maintaining and keeping now. And just the whole thing about cost and, adjuncts. And we've all, both Jason and I have experienced that as adjunct instructors at different institutions. Just how the food chain, kind of works in higher education. It's challenging. There's just not that many tenure track positions. There's more folks that are vying for those positions. And so I think that the shakeup of that is continuing, but I don't know that I can see anything that's going to be a, line in the sand, but it is, hopefully we are stabilizing in many ways as we come out of COVID. Our daughter was able to take all of her classes online this semester. That's why she was able to move with us to North Carolina. She's headed back to be in person for her last semester there in Oklahoma. But again, lessons learned, that kind of circles us back to the beginning. And hopefully there's opportunities in higher ed as well as in K-12 to, learn some positive lessons from what we did and experienced during the COVID times and make our situation better. But in some cases, departments are just sort of fighting to survive and struggling, as far as not having to declining enrollments and all those kind of things. But I'm sure that varies considerably. I know from the standpoint of independent schools, both back in Oklahoma and here, lots and lots of parents and lots of families signing up, for a limited number of spots. But the situation in public schools, which we could do a completely different show about, is pretty tough. So,
yep.
All right, sir. Well, we got about a couple minutes here. We got some times for Geeks of the Week. So do you have a culminating Geek of the Week for the year of 2020?
Yeah, this is something I'm not sure if I mentioned directly in the show, but I have moved back to getting more of my resources from an RSS reader. So I'm going back to the future of sorts. And Wes and I have both talked about and maybe even bemoaned the unfortunate, untimely death of Google Reader. which seems like decades ago, but I would think it was 8 or 9 years ago. And it just was a very, especially when you like to cover everything or you like to see the headlines and not have to go from site to site to site to site, a good RSS reader is pretty invaluable. And I'm using the Inno reader. It's the free version right now. I was so into this, I was prepared to sign up and pay for it at the time, but I found that the free version meets my needs. But we could talk about RSS probably for hours and hours itself. But if you are looking at maybe trying to be a little more thoughtful about your media presence, funny to say, in 2022, almost 2023, I think an RSS reader might help you put your hands around the things you want to know without grasping too far.
Lisa says she uses Feedly, and I still have my Feedly account, although I haven't really updated any feeds that are in it. But I look at it from time to time. But I would say that Mastodon could serve in that role. By the way, every Mastodon channel immediately converts to an RSS feed. So on our family learning blog, I put a feed of my Mastodon just by using an RSS widget. My geek of the week is actually what people who, and maybe I've made some people sick who were trying to watch this online by having such an active animation. But the animation that I've had in the background here is a visualization of Winter Storm Elliott, right? Because we're naming these winter storms now to anthropomorphize them and generate more fear and eyeballs probably for the Weather Channel. But this was originally shared on the Bird site, as Twitter is called on Mastodon, by Colin McCarthy. But it is a visualization, showing this really deep dive that I think, was it Siberian cold that finally, crossed the Arctic Circle and, came down to even affect Houston, Texas, which was down below freezing for a couple days. So that's my geek of the week. But what I would say, and I put I actually did a little video about this on YouTube. You can create lists for Mastodon like you can for Twitter. And I'm using that iOS app Toot, T-O-O-T with an exclamation point. And it's just really great to, create lists about different things. I'm showing my age because I even have a list for birding and I'm looking at birds. Isn't that just, yeah, I remember my parents did that. I was like, you're getting old. So, here I go. I'm watching the birds. But seriously, I think that in addition to RSS and some of these early technologies and being in Mastodon is a reminder of that, having your own website, having your own place where you share ideas, and people can link to those and they're not going to go away. Your whole account. I've downloaded my Twitter archive a couple times. I don't know if you've done that, Jason, but I still need to do that again. And there are some good tools. Be careful from a security standpoint, right? Because you run these Python scripts or whatever, just off of the web and off of GitHub, you're taking risks with your machine. But you can convert your Twitter archive to a complete HTML with not having shortened Twitter links that even rely on Twitter and Twitter's link shortener. Anyway, to just make it a browsable, searchable archive of tweets. Because, I have been using Twitter as my main, would you call this a bear trap, for trapping information? I mean, it's been my place, not only to share information, but to trap it because I can go back later, put in a hashtag, put in a keyword. Oh my gosh, there it is. I've found it. And so I'm still using Twitter as well as Mastodon, but I'm just finding myself using Mastodon more and investing in that list building. So my RSS or that same kind of like building feeds that I can filter the information and get, listen to people that I want to listen to. I think RSS is awesome. And it's really a sad thing that I don't know, maybe it was just too geeky for mainstream. And that's why people did it. Or there wasn't enough ad revenue in it for Google. That's why they killed Reader. I don't know. But anyway, I'm glad you're into InnoReader, and I'm, excited to find Mastodon a inspiring and beneficial environment to encounter ideas and to, throw questions out there and things like that. So, all right, sir, I think we've exceeded the hour yet again. I think folks can still find you on Twitter. Is that rumor true?
That's true. Yes, I am still on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach, or you can find me on Mastodon, Neif, Neif at mastodon.cloud.
And how is the planning for the NCCE closing keynote going?
It's going really well. I've got some really exciting ideas, and it's my first big convention keynote. I've done some smaller events in Montana before, and some regional stuff, but I'm really excited, and I've got a great speech in the works, and I'm looking forward to that event late March in Tacoma, Washington.
That is fantastic. Well, you can find me at wesfryer.com/after, and I'm still on Twitter at wfryer, and I'm wfryer at mastodon.cloud. That may change at some point. But we are the EdTech Situation Room. We are a normally once a week podcast coming to you on Wednesday evenings, although we've been coming on Thursdays and had a little bit of a disrupted schedule here. But hopefully we'll be back on a more normal schedule in 2023. You can download our podcast wherever you find podcasts and subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Follow us on Facebook, because when we do have a change in our show, we will post that both to Twitter and Facebook. And now we'll be sharing that on Mastodon. So you can find us at EdTechSR at mastodon.education. So we want to encourage everybody to stay savvy and stay safe. Hope you had a very jovial Festus. Happy Hanukkah, happy Christmas, whatever celebration you happen to have. And hopefully you are staying warm. And we look forward to hopefully continuing to learn together with you in 2023. And we wish everybody a happy new year and a happy 2023. So take care until next time.
Good night.